Today is August 9th, 2025, and that means it is the anniversary of the day that literally changed the course of my life forever. Today's the anniversary of the passing of Jerry Garcia. Jerry Garcia died August 9th, 1995, while in a drug rehab center in California. He passed away of a heart attack. The band was on break in between their summer tour and their fall tour, and obviously there never was a fall tour. I had an extraordinarily fucked up childhood, and my parents got divorced when I was the unwanted byproduct of a one-night stand. My parents got divorced when I was 8. I ran away from my mother's house at 13 to go live with my father, and I dropped out of high school at the beginning of my sophomore year, kicked around the Midwest for a while, and then wound up traveling across the country. So from spring of 92 until August 9th, 1995, August 9th, 1995, I hitchhiked back and forth across the country. I lived in a tent, and I had everything I owned on a backpack. I had one of those big framed out hiking backpacks, and everything I owned was in it. And my little 2-person tent did this thing where it folded up and you could just attach it to the outside of the backpack. And you just took this thing out and threw it in the air, and it sprung into a tent. And the way I lived was, well, the first year it was with a carnival. The summer of 92, I worked for a carnival, and that's how I lived. I went from carnival site to carnival site to carnival site with this carnival, working one of the rides and living outdoors. And then in the fall of 92, I sort of folded in with the Grateful Dead crowd, the Deadheads. And the Grateful Dead, just so that you're aware, never went on tour like in support of an album, right? Like Metallica put out And Justice for All, right? And then they went out on the Damaged Justice tour in support of that album. That's not what the Grateful Dead did. They did a fall tour, they did a summer tour, they did a winter tour, they took breaks in between, but it wasn't in support of any album. It was just another tour, and they just did it constantly. And so the way I lived is, while they were touring, I would kind of fold into this nomadic community, and there are ways that you can earn, eat, stay alive, this, that, the other. And then when they would take breaks, you would find odd jobs, either in the town that they left you in, or in some of the towns between where they left off and where they were going to kick up the next store, start up the next store. You make your way to the next town and maybe work odd jobs along the way. And I did that for a few years. And that was the first half of my 20s, and I was content. I was happy with my lifestyle. You never knew where you were gonna find your next meal. You never knew where you were gonna wind up that night. It was a very freeing lifestyle. Hard to describe. Just the way I imagine pioneers back in the day felt. And I had no intention of ever settling down and becoming a normal human being. And the Grateful Dead wrapped up their summer tour that year, 1995, with a set of shows at Soldier Field in Chicago. So me and the gentleman that I was traveling with, a friend of mine that I was traveling with, wound up, and his brothers wound up back in Chicago, because that's where the last shows were. And so we were hanging out at his mom's house. She let us crash there. And he would always go make some money, well, whenever we were in town, with some people that he knew. He would go chop firewood with this guy that he knew. And him and his brother were out chopping firewood, and I was back at his mom's house. His mom didn't give a shit, just fucking don't cause any problems and whatever. And I'm quite literally sitting there in the middle of the day, and I see I think it was the WGN, I don't know if it was the 11 a.m. news or the noon news, and it came across with the story of Jerry Garcia's passing. And I just sat there like, what? And I remember getting in the car, that was at the house, one of the cars that was at the house, I can't remember whose car it was, and driving out to see the guys at the I just took one of the cars and driving out to see the guys at the yard where they were chopping firewood over in Lamont to give them the news that Jerry had passed. And like it was instant tears from one of the guys. The other guy was standing there just in stunned silence like I was. They wound up leaving work and coming back to the house with me. That night we went down to Cricket Hill, Montrose Harbor, with a bunch of other Deadheads and kind of celebrated Jerry. But upon the passing of Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead were no more. And they wouldn't take back up touring in the form of Dead and Company for quite a few years after that. Several, as a matter of fact. So our way of life was gone. The tour that moved around was the mechanism by which we could have like a baseline. Just pick a city, right? The Grateful Dead are in Tempe, Arizona. All right, great. So Tempe is going to be our base of operations for the next week. We're going to make money on the Dead lot, maybe make some money in town somewhere, and we're going to enjoy the sights, we're going to whatever, and then we're moving on to the next town, right? That provided a baseline for us, and now it was gone. I never had any intention on stopping that lifestyle. And instantaneously, it was stopped for me. We're in the Chicagoland area. I'm staying in my friend's house in Shorewood, or in Cicero. His mom eventually moved out to Shorewood. We're staying in his mom's house in Cicero, and I'm like, that's it. That's over. I got to get a job. And he got me a job because he had done some landscape work in the past. He got me a job for me and him working on a landscape crew in Berwyn, Illinois, cutting grass. And I cut grass the rest of that summer. And then started doing landscape construction work the next year, and shortly thereafter that met my wife, got married, started having kids, bought a house, started my own landscape company, retired early, started doing social media content, and now we're doing this. And none of that happens if Jerry Garcia doesn't have a heart attack. None of it. If Jerry Garcia never has a heart attack and continues touring with the Grateful Dead the way Bob Weir is currently touring with the Grateful Dead, the way Mickey Hart and Bill and the rest of them toured with the Grateful Dead for as long as they have, but in different versions, if the Grateful Dead just kept on going and never stopped and they were all still alive, most of them are still alive, I probably never stop. I probably never stop living that life because I loved that life. I love the life I have now more than I loved that life. But in the moment, I loved that life. There was no reason for me to stop it. Which means, if not for one man's heart attack, Renee and I are never a couple. None of my kids between Renee and I are ever born. I probably never get into landscaping. Most likely, this doesn't exist. My social media presence. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. There's no way of knowing, but this version of it certainly doesn't. "30 years ago, one man has a heart attack, and my entire life changes forever." That is the universe leading you down a path. You know what I mean? This also marks the conclusion of a period of time we call the days between Jerry's birthday and his death, the anniversary of his birthday and the anniversary of his death. And all I can say is what I say every year. We miss you, Jerry.